HQ presented by Geico, and we have hit the eve of the first round of the NBA draft, and Kyle Boone put together his final mock for us. Risacher and Sarr, the two Frenchmen, going 1-2 respectively. Reed Sheppard third. Some of our analysts are saying that he could be the best prospect in this draft. Donovan Clingan, by the way, falling a little bit in this mock, down to 7 for the Portland Trailblazers. Let's bring in Kyle Boone along with Adam Finkelstein here as we count down to the draft now, closing in on 24 hours to go until we finally get that #1 overall pick. We've got a bunch of mocks at CBSSports.com, Kyle. Every one of them has a different top 3. Would you say this is close to being consensus or more of a crapshoot at this point?
I think it's nearing something closer to a consensus. The betting markets have shifted here over the last 10 days to 2 weeks, where Zachary Risacher has taken over as the projected #1 overall pick. If that's the case, we believe that Alex Sarr will fall to #2 to the Washington Wizards. And then #3, I think, is still open, but Reed Sheppard from Kentucky, one of the best shooters in this draft class. It seems like the Houston Rockets have fallen in love with him. He's a great shooter, really athletic, good defensive playmaker. So I think we're nearing something closer to a consensus. We could always see some changes in the final day leading up to the draft, and that has happened several times over the last few years. But right now it's looking like it's going to be Risacher, Sarr, Sheppard, and that's how I have it in my latest mock draft.
Guys, I think the other real possibility here is that there could be a trade. And while I agree with Kyle's top 3 if things hold pat, I think the other thing you really have to be on the lookout for is Houston moving that 3rd pick. There's a lot of teams who are motivated to trade up and try and draft Donovan Clingan. The Memphis Grizzlies are tops among them. Houston has been known to be listening to offers for that 3rd pick, but they're not the only team that's going to listen. I think Charlotte's going to listen. So there is a significant potential for trades with Donovan Clingan being the player that a lot of teams are very interested in moving up to try and draft.
We're going to get to Clingan in just a second because he did kind of fall down Kyle's board, relatively speaking, to some of the other mocks that we've seen. We do have a few G League prospects as well from the Ignite team that could be in the lottery. Modest Buzelis is one of those guys, and you have him going 5th to the Pistons, Kyle.
Yeah, that's right. And, the Pistons, a team that, arguably could have been picking #1 each of the last 2 years, ends up falling to #5 each of the last 2 years. And this would be a consolation prize that I think they could be excited about. Modest Buzelis, entering the pre-draft cycle last year, was actually considered potentially as the #1 pick. He struggled last season in G League Ignite shooting the basketball. That's something that he's been able to hang his hat on historically as a prospect. Just struggled a little bit last season, but has good size, can put the ball on the floor, very versatile combo forward. So I think if he's on the board there, the Pistons probably will hear some trade offers there, especially as we mocked here, Donovan Clingan, if he is still on the board, I would imagine people are going to be calling. But here we have them just taking Modest Buzelis, someone who I think they could pair with Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren as part of their young core to build around long term.
Guys, the big question in Detroit is what is Trajan Langdon going to do? Because this is his first draft where he is absolutely in charge. Coming out of Atlanta, where he was arguably the second voice in that front office, but here in Detroit, this is his show. So while a lot of people, myself included, assume that Buzelis is the pick that makes the most sense, we really don't know. And the recent evidence of that is the fact that last week they fired Monty Williams. This was a guy who had $65 million left on his contract to coach the team. It just goes to show that we don't know what people in Detroit are thinking right now. So while Boone and myself both think Buzelis would make a lot of fit on this roster, I think Detroit is a little bit more of a wild card than people are admitting right now, just because we don't have any history to gauge what they might do by.
And don't have a head coach yet to succeed Monty Williams at this point. The Spurs, the only team with multiple top 10 picks. They're picking at 4, they're picking at 8. They've got Wemby, but what are their needs, Kyle, and who do you have them pairing together here?
They need backcourt help, they need shooting, and they need size, I think, to add some defense. And they could do kind of a little bit of both. At #4 and #8, we have them taking Stephon Castle and then Tinjon Salon from France. And Castle, I think, is one of the best most NBA-ready defensive prospects at the wing in this class. He just won a national championship with UConn. There's some questions about his offense, his confidence shooting the basketball, but I think would be a good fit as kind of a combo playmaker for the Spurs to build around with Victor Wembanyama and Salon, who is from France. He's 6'10". He's a really good shooter, can put the ball on the floor, I think can defend multiple positions. The Spurs need to add some versatility, obviously, on their roster. They need to add some shooting. And I think if Castle's shot is able to come through and really develop in a strong way, they're able to add some shooting, they're able to add some playmaking, able to add some length, kind of checks a ton of boxes here for the Spurs as they're rebuilding, again, around Victor Wembanyama, the #1 pick from last year's class.
The thing that I keep hearing about the Spurs is that shooting is going to be a requisite. So while I agree that Castle is a prospect that is certainly in the mix and would make sense on a lot of different levels, I think they're also going to consider guys like Shepherd if he slips to 4. Again, that might be incumbent on somebody trading up to take Klingon at 3. If Risacher should slip, that's another one they would be very interested in. I think Dalton Connect is a prospect that would make a lot of sense for them, because I really think that spacing, as we get closer and closer to this draft, is becoming a theme that you continue to hear San Antonio linked to. They do not want any more non-shooters. Exactly how they evaluate Stephon Castle in that mix is something we're going to find out tomorrow night.
Only other team with multiple lottery picks is Portland. And Kyle, that's where you had Donovan Klingon falling to, along with Kaishan George. But Adam, I want to go back to you on this, because you brought up Klingon and how teams might be trading up to try to get him. What is the selection range that you see Klingon going from, with Kyle having him down here at 7, but we've seen him up as high as 1 in some of our mock drafts?
Yeah, that's accurate. I think it is 1 to 7. I think Atlanta still has Klingon on the board. They're still contemplating it. I believe that if this is Quinn Snyder's choice, the head coach, that Klingon will be the pick. But it is conceivable that he slips all the way down to 7. He is not expected to get past Portland. There's also a number of teams in this mix here who do not need a center. Houston, San Antonio, Charlotte, even Detroit, albeit maybe to a lesser extent, because, again, we don't know how Trajan Langdon feels about Jalen Duren. So there's a lot of places where Donovan Klingon just doesn't fit. And then there's teams, we talked about Memphis. Chicago is another place. Oklahoma City is a third place. All who have inquired about the potential to trade up to get Donovan Klingon. So of all the prospects that we're talking about, I would say that Klingon is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, no pun intended, domino in this first half of the lottery.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, Adam, because Donovan Klingon has the second best odds to go #1 on draft night, according to the markets right now. But I think there's a real chance that he ends up slipping out of the top 5. If that is the case, I would imagine there's going to be a strong appetite for teams trying to move up to secure Donovan Klingon, one of the best defensive anchors in this draft class. He kind of powered that UConn team to 2 consecutive national championships. I think he was the best player for UConn on a 37-win team this past season. And then we have Kaishan George at number 14 to the Portland Trailblazers. Klingon, I think, can add some size. They drafted Scoot Henderson last year at the guard spot. Kaishan George has good length. He's a really good shooter, can check a lot of boxes. I think can play multiple positions. I think the versatility that he would give Portland, especially in this scenario, adding Klingon, already adding Scoot Henderson from last year, would make a lot of sense and really build out this young core for the Trailblazers.
Hard to talk draft lottery without talking the Oklahoma City Thunder, who seemingly have pretty much 50% of the picks that we've seen the last few years in the draft. They were able to keep their lottery pick, much to the chagrin of Bulls fans who thought they should have gotten a lot more in that Giddy Caruso trade. Kyle, what do you have them doing there at 12, coming off a season where they were the 1 seed in the West?
Yeah, I have him selecting Ron Holland, and this would be something of a surprise. The surprise in that Ron Holland may not make it out of the top 10 in this draft class. He was the #1 recruit coming out in last year's cycle, and I know Adam Finkelstein's a really big fan of what he is as a prospect. Great size, great athleticism, can really jump at a high level. He led G League Ignite in scoring last season. Just a guy who has a ton of physical tools, and OKC OKC, over the years has shown that it really, really values guys who have length, who have athleticism, and have tools to really develop. Already have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in tow. Chet Holmgren is already in Oklahoma City. So, building out that young roster, already adding Alex Caruso via trade to kind of fill out that backcourt. It make a lot of sense here, Ron Holland, to kind of build out that wing depth as well. I think Ron Holland could be a nice fit if he's still on the board for the Oklahoma City Thunder at number 12.
Yeah, I would love this for OKC. Ron Holland was the best player in high school basketball a year ago. He went to Ignite. He averaged over 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, and somehow he's slipping. People question the shooting, but I'll tell you, he's one of the very best competitors in this class. He's an athletic big wing who gets after it on both ends of the floor. Because of the shooting questions, I don't think he would have fit in OKC a week ago when they had Josh Giddey, but now that they've moved him and they've got Caruso, another spacer, I think it makes a lot of sense for Boone to mock this pick here, because Holland is someone that could really fit with what's going on in an OKC team that values multiple people who can get paint touches. That's what their offense is predicated on, and he does fit that mold.
All right, Adam Finkelstein, Kyle Boone with us here on HQ. They are going to be with us tomorrow in our pre-draft and draft coverage on CBS Sports HQ beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. They'll also be joined by Mike O'Donnell, Tim Doyle.
Best friend.
Yeah. Rotisserie chicken, you talking about Mike O'Donnell? Yeah, he'll bring his own bird. Avery Johnson, Gary Parrish, Matt Norlander will be a part of this coverage as well.